You are watching The Chorus in the Chaos Podcast, relevant and reformed thinking, by bringing a biblical worldview and a Christ-centered focus to the conversation.
Hello and welcome to The Chorus in the Chaos Podcast. My name is Jack, and I'm joined by a very special guest. Josiah Stowe from Dominion is back with us. Josiah, how are you?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm good. Thank you. And Josiah and I were interacting on Facebook a week or two ago, and the topic of financial wealth management, looking at one's finances through a post-millennial worldview, the discussion came up. Mm-hmm. And he suggested, I thought it was a really good idea. Let's put two mics in front of us and talk about what that means. Yeah. What does it mean to look at one's finances and financial stewardship through a post-millennial worldview? Mm-hmm. So anyway, well, that'll be the episode. Josiah, anything else you want to introduce yourself? I don't know. You've been on the podcast before, but just in case people missed it.
Yeah. It's been a little while. So, my name is Josiah Stowe. I am the founder of Dominion Wealth Strategists, the only distinctly reformed financial consulting firm. There are other reformed individuals who work in finance, but as far as I could tell, we're the only company that is distinctly reformed. So just helping people take dominion over their financial sphere. So obviously that's on my mind, pretty well top of mind, almost all day, every day. And then on top of that, I'm a Reconstructionist. I'm a Baptist as well, which I hear is a conflation of terms. But full-blown Reconstructionist, so post-millennial, presuppositional, theonomic, Calvinistic, covenantal, all that good stuff. In the same vein as like R.J. Rushdoony, Gary North, David Chilton before he became a preterist, and that sort of general, I suppose, CREC adjacent theological tradition.
Yeah, it's a lot of big words.
Oh, we're going to get into big ones. Don't worry. What's your super infralapsarian views? We got plenty of big words in this theological space.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time to. No, I'm just kidding. But let's jump into it. So let's talk about a theological foundation and that's influence on financial stewardship. So kind of where our discussion began and where I think is a good place to start here. I'll just kind of ask you point blank, and you might want to define some terms along the way, right? Because some of our listeners may or may not know all those words, but how does half those words I don't even, I'm just kidding. I feel like I'll have to Google them as I go along, I guess. What does Chat GPT say? No. How does a post-millennial worldview, right? And you might want to define what that is very succinctly, but how does a post-millennial worldview generally shape the way Christians should think about wealth and financial stewardship? Kind of paint the picture for us.
Yeah. So post-millennial is essentially someone who believes that Christ wins here on the earth without the need for direct and violent intervention. That it's not just a general upward trend, but we actually do see victory here on the earth. That the earth is fully redeemed, space and time under Christ's feet until the last enemy is death, and that the means through which he accomplishes that is through his body, namely the church.
Yeah.
So it's a generally... I know amillennials and premillennials don't really like this term when used to describe post-mills, but it's an optimistic view of history. Like, we won and we are continuing to win. So we will see a general upward trajectory with regards to the Christianization of the entire planet, the gardenization of the planet. And it's not the violent upheaval that the dispensational premillennialists would hold to, like a recreation. It's actually just a redeeming of the creation. So I'd say that's the general... obviously, there's a lot more we could get into in the post-millennial sphere. I tend to hold a little bit more to the puritanical post-millennialism, where there is a literal 1,000 year golden age, but not so far as Jonathan Edwards' historicist view, where for me it seems like history will be on an upward trajectory, and then when Christ does return, everyone's going to look back in history and say, "Wow, yeah, you're right. The last 1,000 years have been basically a golden age. How about that?"
Yeah.
But a bruised reed he will not break, a dimly burning wick he will not put out. It's going to be gradual, slow, and to counter my old dispensationalist arguments when I was a dispensationalist, not perfectly consistent. We will have backsliding. We will have times where things don't go perfectly well. We will have entire nations not crumble into the sea per se, but fail and become de-Christianized for a time. Like we do believe in a general upward trend, not that every day is objectively better than the last, and there will be no backsliding ever. And in fact, there is still the final rebellion and judgment. Right? So we do believe in a huge backslide that will happen down the road. So that just general misconceptions about what post-millennialism holds to. But it's just that Christ wins on the earth and we don't decapitate the head from the body in that victory.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So, of the Chorus and the Chaos admins or podcast hosts, I am a post-millennialist. I'm the only one. The other two guys are not. Hence why I'm here, and they're not debating us. But no, well said. So, okay, so if someone has a post-millennial worldview, if they believe that things are generally getting better, that the gospel conquers, Christ conquers, and we're not in a pit. Things are not basically on a downward trajectory until Christ comes in at the 11th hour and saves things. That's the inverse view. But a lot of people have it. It would be like the left behind view, right? The opposite of that. But if someone has this post-millennial worldview, how does that influence wealth? How does that influence financial stewardship?
Yeah,
or how should it? I should say.
Right, in a couple of key ways, mostly because we have a longer time horizon, I think. A lot of post-millennials still believe that we're practically still in the early church. If you're Amil, Christ could return at any time because it's just a spiritual fulfillment of the church age. But when you're post-mill, we do expect to see the last enemy as death. And there's still more enemies that Christ has yet to conquer through his body. So we have a much, much longer time scale. It could be tens of thousands of years. I personally, if there are going to be more Christians in heaven than heretics in hell, we have a lot of work to do. A lot more people need to be saved. And then that needs to last for a very long time. So if you're thinking out 1,000 generations instead of 1,000 days, things are going to shift dramatically with regards to your financial planning. You're not just planning for your children, which my parents barely did because they were expecting the rapture any day now. 1988, right? 88 Reasons Why the Rapture is going to happen in 1988. My grandparents are assured still somehow that I'm living in the last generation and that I'm going to be proven wrong when I end up being raptured 3.5 years into the tribulation because they're pre-wrath. So they're still very assured of that. So the planning is incredibly short-sighted. Let's do whatever we can with the finances we have now or the assets that we have now to maximize our impact over the next 3.5 years, 7 years, one generation, as opposed to, well, let's plan slower. Let's build better. And the analogy I think is most helpful is if I gave you like a bunch of bricks and I said, build the tallest tower you can in 10 seconds, you might stack the bricks end to end. Right, I've got 10 seconds. I've got to get as tall as I can. It's going to be an unstable structure, but you got somewhere, right? But if I say, here's a bunch of bricks, here's some mortar, and then in the next year, build me the tallest tower that you can. Well, okay, now you're going to be clearing off the ground. You might dig a little bit of a foundation. You might pour some concrete. You might, all right, well, let's lay the bricks out in this way, and you might start way wider, right? You're going to build maybe like a pyramidal structure because you want it to last for the ages. So it's going to be an entirely different structure and you're building it in an entirely different way if your time horizon's different. And more as a dig at dispensationalism, we don't believe that this world is going to burn away in a fervent heat. So what we build here matters. There's an aesthetic argument. It's not just that we do good work. It's how we do it, and it's how long it lasts, and it's how beautiful it is in the interim. There's a whole bunch of distinct differences, not only with end goal in mind, but the means to get there. And of course, that's very broad. I'm sure we could get into specifics, but essentially, are you planning for your great grandchildren's retirement account? Are you planning for your last name to be associated with like a signet ring eventually? Are you trying to build your family house? Are you buying property where your great grandchildren might sit under the shade that your grandkids of the trees that your grandkids plant? Right? How are you stewarding the land? Because again, as a dispensationalist, I didn't really care about recycling or the environment or anything like that. Well, who cares about global warming? It's going to get a heck of a lot hotter here in about 3.5 years. Right? So it just changes so much about your value structure and the way you want to get where you want to go. And it changes everything as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you mentioned cultivating a place for someone to sit in the shade, right? Like generations down the line. It made me think of Genesis 1:28, the Dominion mandate, right? So how does that influence it to you, right? And tell you what, I should have had it pulled up beforehand, but I'm a terrible podcast host. Let me make sure I don't misquote it. Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth."
Mm-hmm.
So this nature of putting creation underneath us and having dominion over it.
Right.
To me, those two things align pretty well with what you were describing, right?
Yeah.
But elaborate on that.
Right, because it's not just dominating, it's taking dominion, which is more a matter of stewardship than a imposition of one's will.
Yeah.
Right. To a point, it's an imposition of one's will, because if we get into the exegesis of Genesis 1, the only time God calls something very good is when it directly correlates to the potential for human flourishing. Right? There are other steps necessary in creation for other steps to happen, but it's only when a step is directly taken that God calls something very good. Right. So like making the stars also, that's great. We're not made for the stars, but the firmament, the space in between the waters above and the waters below where man lives, that's good.
Yeah.
Right. Having the birds and the fish, that's great. But having the green plants, that's good. Right. So everything in creation is designed or was designed by our Creator for our good and for us to co-create with Him. And I'll define that because that might ruffle some feathers. Not ex nihilo, but God creates the dirt, we make the mud pile, right? Or we make the bricks. He has created every atom, and we don't make any new ones. We do destroy some sometimes. Nuclear energy, that's a fun one. Turning matter directly into energy every once in a while. But the amount of matter, the amount of energy that God has given us is static, more or less.
Yeah.
We don't add in that realm, but we do take the raw elements that He has given us and we gardenize them. Where God created Eden, here you go. There's the picture of what creation could look like, Adam. Now go out from Eden and gardenize the rest of the world. You had a perfect sinless creation and you only had one garden. It wasn't the planet of Eden, it was the garden within Eden that Adam was meant to go out and replicate, take dominion over the rest of the earth and turn it into a place of human flourishing. So when you have that strong of a mandate in the created order, it's veiled, it's corrupted a bit with the entrance of sin and the fall, but it cannot be destroyed. It is inherent to creation. It is a place for human flourishing and a place for man to take dominion over. And no matter how hard we try, we can't get away from that dominion mandate.
Yeah.
We end up turning it into a garden, or because of our sinful fallen nature, we end up domineering over it and basically creating a place instead of human flourishing, we have sinful flourishing. We have sin and death flourishing because of the actions of man, actions taken that are sinful. So with all of that as a precursor, the dominion mandate financially basically means that we need to take those immaterial things. Well, I suppose currency, stores of value. There's gold in the land of Havilah in Genesis 2. It's a medium of exchange and a store of value that's given to man directly when there's only two people on the planet. Right here, as you create civilization and promote human flourishing, you're going to need some way to fractionalize your bartering system so that you can more efficiently make exchanges of value. And the store, or when you do good work, you create wealth. And so that wealth that you create will need to be exchanged in some way, shape, or form, so you're not trading entire houses for entire flocks of sheep. But you can fractionalize that and say, yeah, I'd like a glass of water, and here's a thing that is representative of the value of one glass of water. Or however you want to do it, because water should be free. That's one of the many things that God gave us that should not be commoditized. Nestle. Not that I have strong opinions on that. I'm from California, so I've got really negative opinions about Nestle. It's going to change your entire view. If post-millennialism is true, then the Dominion mandate is still binding in this day and age and on this earth.
Yeah.
Not a new heavens and a new earth, not a total recreated order, but this one, which means we need to steward the planet. We need to not support the industries that are polluting the planet. We need to not participate in behaviors that we should not be promoting directly or indirectly. And we need not be hyper suspicious or I suppose the word would be isolationist from the systems and the world at large. We actually need to participate in them, those that we can meaningfully participate in, and reform those things that are being done poorly. So I do see a lot of, not typically the ones that end up sitting down with me, but I do see a lot of Christians basically hyper wary of the stock market. Like, oh no, that's the gross evil thing that where business is done. And like Disney is evil and Tesla's evil and Apple's evil and Meta's evil. Therefore, I can't put money in the stock market in good conscience because there's evil things happening there.
Right.
So, okay. Also, don't go outside because every single war has happened out there. Right. So we need to take a little bit more of an intentional approach, a little bit more of a militant approach even. There are systems out there that are corrupt. Okay, let's go fix them. And God's not just going to hand them to us on a silver platter. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort. It's going to take time. And it's going to take way more thought than most people tend to give it credit for.
Right.
And we have a longer time horizon in which to do all of that thinking and that planning and that somewhat hostile takeover. And then those systems are going to be better off because we did that. Because who's a better steward of the earth than those who have a right view of reality and are working directly under the guidance of God himself.
Yeah. Well said. So I think as we talk, so listener, you can figure out when we're recording this. I think as we talk, President Trump is announcing his decisions on all the tariffs and stuff. So I've purposely turned my phone down so I wouldn't get all these alerts. But that's happening as we speak. And you mentioned the stock market, and very likely tomorrow will be volatile in the stock market one way or another because of this. So thinking about the stock market, how does this post-millennial worldview, if you look at the world and say, okay, I want to be a good steward, I want to have a godly disposition and dominion over wealth management, how then should one deal with the volatility of the stock market?
Yeah. And just a quick disclaimer in case any SEC ears are listening, I am not in any way, shape, or form soliciting for the purchase of stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, or any of that, nor specifically telling any individual to buy or sell any of those assets. So yeah, how should Christians deal with volatility in general? It depends. Again, situation to situation. I'd say most of the people who are actively in the stock market shouldn't be. I think there's a far lower threshold for stock purchasing than there ought to be, where anyone with $5 can just start buying portions of entire companies, whether they understand what that company's doing or not. And you need a heck of a lot more than just a ticker symbol and 5-year to date history of a price in order to know whether one should make that purchase in the first place.
Right.
And anything less than about $15,000, $20,000 really isn't worth putting out there anyway. You are incurring a ton of risk for not a meaningful gain in actual dollars back. High yield savings will get you 5%. So if you're 8 to 15%, if that's not a meaningful amount of money, where that rate of return would be sizable, it's not worth it, generally speaking. So if you don't have enough money to worry about losing it all in the stock market, you shouldn't be in the stock market. But with volatility, essentially, the stock market does not like chaos. Economies don't like chaos. They like predictability. They like knowing that if they purchase the thing, it's going to end up at their place, and it's going to look the same, and it's going to have the same features, and it's going to be identical to the thing that they ordered. Right? And they want to know that tomorrow they can resell it for a similar price. So when you're introducing tariffs, and as how would you say it? As chaotically as our current sitting president is doing, where it's on the docket this month and it's not on the docket the month after, and suddenly Canada shoots up a tariff and he shoots it right back.
Yeah.
This whole ball game is not jiving well with stockholders, right? Because we don't know what the future is going to look like, and a lot of the value of the stock market is predicated upon future hypothetical gains.
Right. Yeah. Investors want to know they want to go into it with predictability, like you
Yeah.
said, and when it changes every other day, there's everyone that you create sell-offs, you create like all this. You said chaos. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's irrational behavior because no one knows what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it can be even rational behavior, as long if it's done predictably, can do some upsetting in the stock market. But generally, they're slow moves.
Right.
And if we want to get real technical, the only movement in the stock market is typically subjectivist value and Brownian motion, with only a little bit of movement over a long period of time of actual value add. Again, getting hyper technical here, but basically, with systems that large, there's going to be up and down movement that is more or less unpredictable.
Right.
I mean, meaningfully mathematically unpredictable. That's why anyone who's like trying to time the market, they're a goofball. It doesn't work. Dollar cost average. Unless you have some insider knowledge, in which case that's illegal. Don't do that. Or you're a senator or something. Right. But for the most part, markets do not like chaos. They don't like unpredictability. So with the tariffs and a president that I don't think most people expected to win this time, it's introduced a huge amount of chaos, and therefore it's taken a lot of legitimate value out of the marketplace, since a lot of that value was predicated upon predictability. That, and to get into tariffs specifically, foreign countries don't pay our tariffs. We do. It's a cost that's
passed on, right?
It's passed on very directly to the consumer. So if you have a huge consumerist nation like the United States and you put a tariff on other countries that we import things from, it's not going to stop the imports. Certainly not while the United States isn't a particularly huge powerhouse with regards to manufacturing. Like, we can't get silicon other than from Taiwan. Like, there's some stuff going on in Texas right now to kind of get the tooling over here, but there's a huge switching cost the United States is going to have to incur before manufacturing comes back here. That's what I think Trump is hoping is going to happen. He's trying to move more manufacturing here so that the United States is not just a country of managers, but a country of producers, that our wealth is meaningful instead of just hypothetical. But in the interim, it's going to really hurt the economy. Everything's going to get more expensive because we are importing a lot, an awful lot of things. And even businesses that you would think are like American made, there's a lot of imported parts. There's a lot of imported materials that are involved in that process. So if everything suddenly gets much more expensive, 25, 30, 125% more expensive, depending on which tariff we're talking about, which item, we're going to have to absorb that cost in the meantime. And the average American isn't in a position where things can get more expensive for them. We're already at a huge deficit. The average American is already $6,000+ in credit card debt, is already $500,000+ in debt in total, including their mortgage. So it's going to hurt pretty bad for a while. And you can thank the president for that and the tariffs. But it's a bitter pill to swallow, because the United States does need to be a productive nation.
Yeah.
We can't sustain. We obviously have not been able to sustain being a country of managers, of middle management and corner offices.
Yeah.
So it's going to hurt. It's not going to be pleasant. It's going to hurt even worse now than it has been the past couple of years. But that's in hopes that long term we end up actually being a productive nation, gardenizing the planet the proper way, instead of just taking advantage of the slave labor of foreign countries and the relative cheapness of their products because of that. We're going to have to bring it back home. Things are going to be more expensive, but eventually things will stabilize. Food in the United States is going to be cheap compared to relative to the dollar. Right? We're going to have cheaper commodities relative to things. And then luxury goods can go back to luxury prices, and basic necessities can come down from luxury prices and just be baseline again, like our parents and grandparents used to have back when America actually made things.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You're the financial expert. I'm not, but I am in the business world.
Yeah,
I am in the business
world.
And I would agree. I think this is going to be painful. I think the tariffs are going to be pretty painful. But it's like ripping off a Band-Aid. At some point we have to do it, because we've become so reliant on others there's no easy way to do this. And when you factor that in with the debt ceiling and the national, like it is a compounding recipe for disaster.
Right.
Yeah. So near term, it'll hurt. Long term, the hope is it is helpful.
Yeah. Like a 5 to 10 year switching cost, it's not going to be a pleasant turnaround.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Exactly. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Going back to thinking about post-millennialism, and we want to, as post-millennialists, we want to be with the gospel, transforming the culture, redeeming it to the kingdom of Christ, improving things. So, what role does financial planning play in preparing one for cultural transformation and, say, a Christian influence on society?
Yeah. And that's actually a pretty simple one altogether. So who is the current head of the Department of Government Efficiency?
That'd be Mr. Musk, right?
That's Elon Musk.
Yes.
Do you know why he's currently the head of the Department of Government Efficiency?
Because he's efficient? I don't know.
Well, he's incredibly efficient. And there's actually a few reasons, kind of a trick question. One, he's incredibly wealthy. He is a man of particular power and influence. And his power and influence is directly or fairly directly correlated to his amount of wealth.
Right.
There are those who like to be out in the open with their power and influence, like Elon Musk. But there are a lot of very powerful people who do not want to be in the limelight, who are perfectly fine pulling very big strings and affecting huge changes from the shadows. And generally, they're not the kind of people you want with power and influence. And the only reason they have it, again, is largely because of money. Right? Money is the economic authority to allocate resources. At least that's the simplest definition I've been able to come up with.
Yep.
Who should have the authority to allocate resources? Probably those who have a right view of reality. So there's a moral onus, almost there is a morality to making sure that Christians have a lot of wealth, that they have that power, that influence, and that they are the ones affecting the right changes in the world. Right? It's been in the hands of reprobates long enough, and we've seen what they've done with it. I think it's about time that the wealth of the wicked that's stored up for the righteous ends up in the hands of the righteous.
Yeah. Yep.
So that post-millennial view is just, okay, we have problems, plenty. We have people bad people in high places, but they do lose. So maybe we should do something about bringing that future that we know is going to happen a little bit closer to now, and taking the actions necessary to immanentize the eschaton, to use some more big words. But we need to bring that forward, and there are actions that we can take that are meaningful right now. And they're going to start with just taking dominion of your own household. I think concentrically working outward from there. Right? Why? Jordan Peterson does have this particular thing right. He's wrong about a lot, but taking the young out of Jordan Peterson. Why are you trying to change the world when you don't even have a clean bedroom? Yeah. Why are you trying to take dominion over the entire nation or over an entire company when you don't even have a nicely manicured front lawn? Right. If you can't take dominion over 2,500 square feet, however big your lawn is, I don't think you have any business trying to play in these larger systems. So you need to do so at home first. Make sure that you have a really stable financial household, which again is going to be difficult. That doesn't mean it's not your responsibility to accomplish over the next 5-10 years or so. So take dominion of your own household. Make sure your own money is in order, that you have proper savings, that you have a high discretionary income, that you're not leaking money out of places you shouldn't, that you are tithing and you are giving to the church, right? So support yourself, support the family, support your community, if you have a company, support your company, and then move outward from there. And if enough people do that, if enough Christians do that, as the gospel goes forth, we'll find out little by little, it happens. Little by little, richer and richer people end up becoming Christians, or Christians end up becoming richer and richer people. We end up slowly but surely and efficiently and biblically taking over these positions of position, power, and influence, having the money to make the changes we want to see in the world, and bettering the entirety of humankind and promoting human flourishing on our way. Yeah. So it's very simple. It's just the gospel message right?
Yeah.
Disciple the nations, teaching them all that I have commanded you.
Hmm.
And slowly but surely, or it could be centuries, could take millennia, but with a sure confidence that it will happen, we don't have to worry about the ends, just the means, and we already know what we should do.
Right. How does a Christian balance this building for the kingdom, building, say, generational type wealth, but also say generous giving? Like how does what is the recipe for that? What does that look like for somebody?
Yeah. Since I do financial planning, not as a CFP, for the CFPs listening, I do financial planning. I'm not a financial planner. Financial consultant. Also not a financial advisor. There's a lot of protected terms in this industry. So how do we do that? Balancing generous giving and building one's own household. And it starts at home. Right? I see a lot of people way overextended or giving to like international mission groups when they aren't even tithing at their local church. So I think a reorientation of there's an order amoris, an order of your loves for those of you who are trending on Twitter. And there's also an order financius, right? An order of your finances. You ought to do things in a certain way, in a certain order. And you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? You want to give generously. That's wonderful. Why are you giving money you don't have? In fact, there was a story of a lady in I think it was the 1100s. I think it was in Jerusalem. Prolific charity. Let's see if I can find her. Yep, there we go. Melisende, Queen of Jerusalem, powerful ruler, influential person. Actually, is this her? This may not be her. By the way, sorry, it's like a thread of a thought. Okay. There's an incredibly influential person back in the day in Jerusalem, if I recall, during the 1100s, who was known for her charity. Like that's all she did. She gave to the poor, gave to the poor, gave to the poor. And when she ran out of money to give to the poor, she took out a bunch of loans to give to the poor, give to the poor, give to the poor. I just had a huge heart for it. When she ran out of traditional loans from the Templars and the other people in the area, she found other people she could borrow money from just to give to the poor, give to the poor, give to the poor. She entirely wrecked the economy and put her kingdom in substantial amounts of debt. And I believe several military conflicts ended up happening because of that. People died.
Believable. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People died because of her, what we might say is untethered or giving that was entirely untethered from reality. Right. So there has to be a limit on your generosity, and you have to fill up your own cup before you can pour it into somebody else's. If your financial household is not in order, you have no business being generous with your money. Be generous with your time. You might have a surplus of that. Be generous with your hospitality. Right? You may have a surplus of that. Be generous with your vegetables from your garden if you have a surplus of that. But if you don't have a surplus, if you're not even meeting basic needs, you have no business giving.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind as well, sort of as a dig at David Platt, you are not called to give sacrificially as a normative means. Right? It's not normal to give sacrificially. But the biblical mandate is to grow, right? Even just the parable of the talents. You were given something to steward. Go make it bigger, right? Adam was given the garden. Go make it bigger. Go make it better. Jacob was given a flock of goats. Go make it bigger, right? So the whole Dominion mandate is to take something and to produce more of it, to take a couple grains of wheat and get a wheat field, and to produce 30, 60, 100 times more. And the church is not a sphere. It's not a organization that is designed to grow things, in at least economically. Right? Most churches do not have a growth fund. They're not investing their dollars, for better or for worse. And so when your money goes to the church, keep in mind, it stops growing. It just gets spent. And if the church has a surplus, they'll find ways to spend. They don't like holding on to capital, generally speaking. So while you may be giving your 2 copper coins, the last thing that you have, and you're thinking that you're being generous because you're misinterpreting the widow's mite parable, but you're trying to be generous, and then the church has an extra 2 copper coins that they don't need, and instead of putting it away and letting it grow, they're going to donate it to a parachurch ministry, and suddenly your extra $100 that you were able to you managed to drum up and wanting to give to charity is used to buy folding tables across the country for an Awana event. Right? It's not the way that these things are designed biblically to be run. The family is the smallest economic unit. The family is where money grows. So instead of giving above and beyond and sacrificially, it's better just to keep that money, to invest it. And I mean that colloquially for the SEC, to make sure that it's growing in some meaningful assets that are meaningfully productive, so that later on down the road, your children and grandchildren can give abundantly and generously, even beyond what you were capable of. But for the generation that doesn't have much to give, they ought to just grow what they have. And for those who do have much to give, let them take on that burden. In fact, there's verses in the New Testament about the extra responsibility of the rich to use their wealth. Right? They are the ones who are going to be giving above and beyond to the church because they have that abundance. And I suppose I'll stop that thought there. There's another one coming. We'll get it.
Yeah, no, it's good. So what, in light of that, if someone wants to be doing better in this way, what are some pitfalls that they can avoid? What are some financial pitfalls that are common and that, listeners or Christians of this podcast should be like, you know what, I need to be, I don't want to fall into this. Right? What are some examples?
Yeah, there's a lot. I could say what's generally common, but nearly every single budget I look at has different problems. So it's hard to give general blanket advice. Everyone needs to pay less for their shoes. Maybe, because I did have a client who was way overpaying for shoes. That's for sure, like $200 a month on shoes.
Wow.
It was her hobby. But I'd say common pitfalls. I see areas that I might highlight fairly often. Utilities comes up first, just going down the list in my head. Utilities, ideally across the nation, about $300 a month for gas, water, electric, and trash. There are some areas like Phoenix, Arizona, and one particular area of Arkansas and one area of Connecticut that go outside of that range because your electricity company has a functional monopoly in that area and they don't have good infrastructure. But generally, I see people overpaying for that. So seal up your doors and windows. Don't leave your doors open in the summer or the winter. Make sure you have proper insulation in your house, and you'll save a lot more than you'd think in that particular area. I also see people paying for cars at all. They have a car payment. I don't like car payments. You are buying a depreciating asset with debt. So not only is the asset getting less and less valuable, but you're being charged interest in order to make that happen. So I would generally recommend, as long as you're not upside down on a loan and you have the capital to buy a car outright, to buy a car outright. That's a really common one. It's like blunder of a financial maneuver. I see people overspending on their tithe because they're calculating it based on gross income, not net income, not actual abundance or take-home pay. I've got a whole article on tithing if you're curious about that.
Now, let me pause you there because I've heard debating stuff. This may be this
good tangent.
This is a tangent. So you're saying someone if you're calculating 10%, it should be on net, not gross, because the argument I've heard otherwise is, quote unquote,
first fruits.
First fruits. God should get his 10% before the government gets theirs, right?
Okay. First of all, I don't know how many of your listeners were raised on a ranch or in agriculture, but there's a huge misconception as to what first fruits actually are. It's the fruit that ripens on the vine before the primary harvest. The fruit that would have fallen off the tree and rotted if you hadn't given it to the Levites. That's first fruits. All right. It's the first run through to get the early ripening fruit. All right. So with that out of the way, stop using that as an argument to give 10% gross. No, generally, I just want to take a more historical approach, assuming that you have a fair number of Presbyterians and Reformed Baptists, assuming different levels of continuity or discontinuity between the Old and New Testaments. The Old Testament tithe, 10% of your storehouse, and you did it 3 times a year. 10% to the Levites, which was essentially a tax, government and church. 10% to the festival tax, actually the festival tithe, where everybody brought 10% of their storehouse with them to Jerusalem for the festival of booths and whatnot. So everyone had a common storehouse and nobody went hungry, right? And the poor tithe as well, which I think was more of a municipal thing. So every city would have a common storehouse that the poor could eat from because the corners of the fields were not always readily available. So that's like 27.1% of your entire harvest if you never ate anything out of your own storehouse. Right? 10%, 10%, 10%. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, your tithe should be 30%, right? If we're going to be, full continuity, and it should be out of your storehouse of your grain and the fruit of the tree. But most of us aren't putting zucchini and wheat in the offering basket. But assuming that it's money instead of produce, what you are productive with, or what the fruits of your labor, if we want to call it that, then I want you to go to an ancient Near Eastern Jew, travel back a couple thousand years, and then ask them what their mortgage payment was. Ask them what their utility payment was. Oh, water bill? You mean like from the stream? Or the stuff that falls out of the sky? Right? Again, I don't think water should cost anything. From the cistern? Yeah, it fell out of the sky. There are a whole lot of operating costs that we have that are foreign in multiple senses from the context in which the tithe was given. And what ended up in the storehouse was after the operating costs of the day, right? Where the bull do not muzzle the ox while he's working. So he would have eaten from the fields. The thief comes in and steals and destroys. The corners of your fields are left for the poor. There was pestilence, and there was disease, and there was thieves. Right. So whatever you actually managed to harvest, you would also pay a portion of that to the workers of the harvest. Some is lost in the threshing and winnowing process. So whatever ends up in your storehouse was after your operating costs, and your operating costs came directly out of the field. So if we're going to bring that forward to today, you have operating costs. You have an ox, so to speak. It's just going to be a metaphorical one. You have the thief that comes in and steals and destroys, and his name is Uncle Sam. He's a relative. He comes in and takes a portion of your crops, right? So you have all of these sort of operating costs, and what actually ends up in your storehouse is the money you have that was not already spoken for before you ever earned it. So for better or for worse, I think that is a more analogous, or to bring that to today, it would be your discretionary income plus any of your line items that are like formally luxuries. Right, so if you have like a pipe tobacco budget, probably don't exclude that from your tithe calculation. If you have a dining out budget, probably don't exclude that from your tithe calculation. But we just want to make sure that we're being faithful and not legalistic. You also don't see the 10% tithe reiterated in the New Testament at all, but it does tell us to give generously, and that the worker deserves his wages. So we instead of having, and if you're trying to go 10%, what you're really asking is, what's the lowest possible number I can give God, and that he won't smite me for, and I can kind of get away with. So the New Testament seems to be more aligning, instead of hard rules as a list meta ethic. Here are the attitudes you ought to promote, and it's a generous giving out of your abundance.
Right.
So I think that's about as exhaustive of a conversation on the tithe as we could probably have. Right.
No, interesting answer. Yeah, it's very interesting.
And I've talked with a lot of pastors about this. Some were happy with it, some were definitely not. But it does seem to be the most consistent exegetical argument for what you should tithe from. We're not ancient Near Eastern Jews. We're not an agrarian society. We don't have a currency that's literally made out of gold and silver. We are in a fiat state, digital currency, with a lot of immaterials that we're pretending are valuable. And you're dealing with operating costs that are just excessive. You've basically been pressed into serfdom without even realizing it, because you're getting bred in circuses in the form of really cheap TVs. And so we need to take our actual economic state into account before we decide to give super generously out of money that isn't real and is given to us, even though we know most of it is going to go right back out the door again. What is your actual productive take home? And then if you can give generously out of that, do so.
There you go. Okay. Good answer. All right. So we begin to wrap up here in the last few minutes. if we have Christians who want to change what they're doing, right? They want to make changes. Can you talk for a minute about Dominion Wealth, some of the services you guys offer, and how those directly contribute to, say, generational wealth, long-term planning, post-millennial worldview? Like, what are you guys doing with clients and customers that really facilitate Christians and clients to move that way, to be more in line with that path?
Yeah. And I want to start with saying, if any of you at home have gotten any value out of this at all, don't let because we're free. I'll just start with that. We do not charge for our services. So I know a lot of people will be like, I don't have enough money to go talk to a finance guy. I don't have enough assets for them to manage, or however you want to think through it. There is really no barrier for entry. You could be dirt poor. You could be living on debt. You could be actively using credit cards to pay your mortgage. You should come sit down with us. The only services that we charge for are estate planning, and that's if you need a trust, durable financial power of attorney, and advanced healthcare directive. Only about $2,500, by the way, cheapest I've ever been able to find it, because I set the price. And our business coaching. So if you want to start a business and you don't want to make a bunch of really stupid mistakes, I'll help you do that. But you need to replace my time for price. Everything else free, properly free. So please just come sit down with us. I'd say the best advice I can give is go get proper advice, because any blanket advice is going to be helpful for some and probably legitimately counterproductive for others. Like, oh, go sell your house because you've got too much house. Some people don't, and selling your house would be a bad idea. Probably the worst financial move some people could make. Oh, you should go sell your car. Well, some people, that's actually a cash flowing asset. They might not, selling your car might be a bad idea. Spend less on groceries. Maybe, because some people have health concerns, and actually buying cheaper groceries at Walmart may end up increasing their medical bills. And so it'd be a bad financial move overall. So please go talk with a competent professional. We've got 7 agents who would love to sit down with you. You might end up sitting down with me and talk through everything. We go over your budget first and foremost, right? We want to make sure that you're honoring God with how you're choosing to allocate your funds, or how you're not choosing to allocate your funds. Just how incidentally some money moves. We want to make sure that you have a plan for every dollar that you make, and that every single store of value, every single medium of exchange that you're utilizing is being used in the most efficient way possible. Ideally, so that your great-great-grandkids don't have to worry about being hyper efficient with every single dollar, and they can afford a little bit of a waste that goes to the poor, right? Incidentally. We also help with debt management, huge thing in the United States. I think I've mentioned some statistics already, but that's on nearly every single budget that we work with, every single data sheet that we work with. There is a pretty substantial amount of debt. In fact, we did recently break a record. We had one guy with about $200,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
Right. And we walked him through the process. Here's the most efficient way to pay it down. It's not the snowball, by the way. That's the second least efficient way to pay down your debts. It's psychologically helpful, I suppose, but you're being charged high interest rates in the meantime. So we target by interest rate, more of an avalanche than a snowball. And debt consolidation loans or 0% intro credit cards for balance transfers to save you a little bit of interest in the meantime. We'll talk through all the options and find you a way forward that's going to get you out of debt the fastest way possible. That's whether or not you take it or whether or not that's the right path for you. We'll also talk through that, but I'll make sure that you at least know what would be the best way forward. We also help with savings accounts, right? There's a couple of banks I like utilizing. I have really good high yield checking, high yield savings, and making sure that you have like a month's worth of money in advance in your checking account. You have half that or $2,000, whichever one's bigger, in your savings account at the same bank, and then maybe 3 to 6 months worth of income, maybe closer to 9 months if you're in a commission job, worth of savings, so that you never have to go into debt. When you're in a position of security and strength, you can use your own money all the time. It's great. And then anything over 6 months, that's where insurance comes in. That's to make sure that those catastrophic financial failures don't have to come out of your own pocket. And dollar for dollar, usually insurance is a phenomenal way to do that. They're called aleatory contracts for a reason. You'll never pay as much as that insurance policy will pay out if you have to use it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way it goes. So also take care of your life insurance. Make sure that you can take care of the widow and the orphan posthumously if necessary, and as cheap as we can reasonably get it with the proper benefits that you're looking for. We even take into account cash value life insurance because it's not the worst thing in the world. We want to make sure that you're getting every sector of the financial services industry as something to place under Christ's feet as his footstool. We also take care of legacy planning, as I mentioned, right? So we help with wills, trusts, durable financial power of attorneys, advanced healthcare directives, right? And got a whole lot more. We do basically everything. There's a reason our tagline is all of Christ for all of life and all of finance for Christendom. So 6 basic general steps. But again, if there's anything going on financially in your life, we're here as a resource to help you put it to good work, or to get out of a bad situation, or to help you get into a better one. We'll talk you through like USDA FHA loans if you want, and FHA loans if you're looking to buy a house or get into real estate investing. We'll talk you through when to form an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, right? Or when you need a bookkeeper. We will talk you through absolutely everything that you need. Oh, we also have a health insurance guy and a tax guy. We do have a real estate investor guy. So we'd be happy to help you out. And properly take dominion over your finances, again, free of charge. And I don't think you're going to find a better deal than that.
Free's pretty cheap.
Free is pretty darn cheap.
Pretty cheap, yeah. All right, Josiah, how can people find you?
Right. Yeah, you might want to. Easiest way is probably to go to www.reformed.money. We did put it right on the nose there. It's a redirect to our website, dominionwealthstrategist.com, and a lot easier to spell. You can also find us on Facebook at Dominion Wealth Strategists. We're on X, Dominion WS, and I think we're on Instagram, but I don't actively manage that one. So you're probably better off just following us on Facebook and X.
Very good. Josiah, thanks for hopping on and talking about finances, post-millennialism. Fascinating stuff. Very good stuff. And anything else? Any closing words of wisdom? Any quotes? Any anything you want to leave the people with as the theme music will come in here in a moment, and you can give them something good.
Sure thing. So I'd say first and foremost, you don't have to be a post-millennialist to be a Christian. You don't need to have perfect dominion over your finances in order to be a Christian. First and foremost, you need to have a right relationship with God. You need to understand the gospel as it's presented and handed down to us, that God became man, lived a sinless life, died on the cross, propitiatory death for your sins, and that he rose again on the third day, and he's coming back soon, whether that be in 5 years or 10,000. Our hope is ultimately in him. And while we're here, the Bible provides everything you need for life and godliness, to include your finances. There is a ton of advice in Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Psalms, even Deuteronomy, Exodus, and in the New Testament, providing meaningful, really solid financial advice. And then, unfortunately, we're now so far removed with regards to our context that some of it needs a little bit of updating and translation for us, and we're here to help you do that. Wealth is a tool of dominion. Right? And I mean that. It's here to help you take dominion. God gave us money for a reason. And I would hope, even if you don't utilize our services, that you take that just a little bit more seriously.
Amen. Yeah, well said. All right, Josiah. Well, thanks so much. This has been Jack and Josiah with the Chorus and the Chaos podcast. Until next time.